Hello BookTube, I'm Vanessa and today I'm here to do my February and March wrap-ups. I did not do my February wrap-up on time, so today I'm just combining them, and these are all the books that I read in February and March. The first thing that I got to read in February, finally, was The Wicked King by Holly Black, and it was everything that I hoped it would be. It was so beautiful and intense and dramatic and fairy-like with politics and backstabbing, and Holly Black, just, I say it all the time, she has the best fairies in YA, in my opinion. The next thing I read was for my American literature class, and that was Walden by Henry David Thoreau, and this was not great. I've been wanting to read Walden for so long because the premise of it, you know, it's basically about Henry David Thoreau going out to live in the woods because he wants to get away from society and just be with nature and simplify his life, and that sounded amazing to me, not to mention I have this beautiful illustrated edition. So I was just like extra excited to see that this was on the syllabus for my class, but it wasn't all I hoped it would be. I will say this, I will say that the first chapter of this book is amazing. It's called Economy, and it's basically Henry David Thoreau laying out the reasons why he wanted to go into the woods and get away from everything in the first place. And basically it's a critique on capitalism, saying how the way society and the way our economy is set up is bullshit because it basically enslaves people to giving up their entire life. And honestly, that whole concept just rings so true for me and makes me feel so sad about the way we have to live our lives, because it shouldn't be this way. Unfortunately, Henry David Thoreau's approach to this issue comes off as like really pretentious and really privileged and annoying, because his solution basically is that he goes to live in a cabin in the woods, you know, with only the things that he needs to survive, which is awesome, except for the fact that, like, yeah, I'm pretty fucking sure we'd all like to go live in a cabin in the forest up at Lake Tahoe. Like, everybody wants to live in a cabin in the woods. That's not something that you do because you're so minimalist and poor and don't want to work and spend money. That's something you get to do when you're rich and can afford to do that, because the rest of us don't just own random lakefront property. Like, the whole reason that he was able to do this is because his friend Ralph Waldo Emerson let him have a cabin on his land for free. So it's kind of like, cool, you lucked out and have a free place to live. But he writes it like as if he's so much better and smarter than everyone else for finding a way to cheat the system, when really it's like, no, you just have a better position in the system than everyone else. And so much of it, even besides that, was just really pretentious. Like, there's a chapter on like what books he likes to read while he's out in the woods, and he's basically like, if you read books in English, you must just be a friggin' idiot, because if you're not reading them in Latin, like, you might as well just go kill yourself. Sorry that not all of us have parents that paid for us to go to Harvard, Henry. I don't know, it was just like, it was nonsense, to be honest, and I was most excited about it for like the nature aspects, because I love nature, and if I could, I would go live like closer to nature. But even his approach to nature in this book was just like very scientific. Like, he was like measuring the thickness of the ice on the lake throughout winter. Like, oh, today the ice was 4 millimeters. And I was like, man, that's not the nature that I'm here to care about, honestly. I don't know. Ultimately, very disappointing. I do highly recommend the first chapter. Like, if y'all want to go read the first chapter of this, I recommend that, but after that, you can just stop. Like, don't bother. After that, I got to read King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo, and I am so happy. This book was so good. I know it's gotten a lot of mixed reviews, and I can definitely see that because it wasn't as much about Nikolai as I think a lot of us were hoping. And also some of the plot was like a little bit shaky, but it's basically divided up between Nikolai, Zoya, and Nina. And I love all three of those people, and just so glad to read a book from all of them. The next book that I attempted to read was White Stag by Kara Barbiri, which I DNF'd real quick. This is a goblin story about a girl who gets kidnapped and taken into the goblin lands to be a thrall, which is basically a slave to the goblins. I was excited for goblins because we don't get a lot of goblin stuff in YA, but the reason I DNF'd it is because the romance in this story is between the main character, who is a slave, and the goblin who owns her, who is her master. I initially wasn't sure how to feel about that. I didn't know if the standards of that being appropriate or not were different because it's a fantasy book about like goblins and magic and stuff. But ultimately, as I read farther, it was starting to feel definitely inappropriate to me. And honestly, it was my own fault. Like, it's right there in the description of the book. She's taken to the Goblin Land as a slave and romance ensues. Like, I should have known, but I think something in me was hoping that maybe the romance was like with a different goblin who wasn't her master. Like I said, I don't know, I should have known better, but I started reading it anyways, and it was that. Another thing that really like disturbed me about this book and that I kind of want to warn people about, it's kind of a spoiler. It's like 1/3 of the way in, sort of plot related. If you don't want to hear about it, I'll put a spoiler warning and you can mute the video until it goes away. But basically, a little bit into the story, this goblin slave owner that she is with, who owns her and is also simultaneously constantly hitting on her creepily, which there are so much problems to unpack with that concept right off the bat, but moving on. The goblin slave owner tells the girl that he is keeping as a slave and who he is clearly expressing sexual interest in that he has known her since she was a baby. I just don't know what to say. He tells her that he saw her being born and he knew that there was something special about her, so he had been planning on stealing her from her family and taking her back to the goblin world throughout her entire childhood and adolescence without her knowing. I just wanted goblins. I didn't want all of that. After that, I finally finished Eldest by Christopher Paolini. I'm buddy reading the Eragon series as a reread with my friend Kelsey from Kelsey Marie Reads, and while I definitely am enjoying it and I'm happy to be rereading Eragon, Eldest was a little bit slow for me, you know? Like, I know everybody kind of likes the time when Eragon is like training with the elves and stuff. I'm not a fan of that. I don't know, I just feel like training montages should be montages. You know, I don't need to hear your every single class lesson. Just give me the highlights, it's fine. But besides all of that, you know, I pushed through. There's tons of other interesting stuff happening in this book and I'm glad that I finished it, and I'm excited to read Berserker. I think Kelsey and I are taking a little bit of a break before we do so because we both got kind of burned out on fantasy. After that, I read the Keep It Classic book club pick of the month, which was Persuasion by Jane Austen. And Persuasion I've never read before, but it was really, really good. I don't think I would say it's my favorite Jane Austen book. I just didn't really feel that like heart and soul that so many of her other books have, but it was very funny, very satirical. So many of the characters are just like over the top ridiculous. And I say this all the time, but I really think people underestimate how funny Jane Austen is. Like, she's a comedian. These aren't just romance books, these are rom-coms, you know? So yeah, I really enjoyed Persuasion. We have picked our next book for the Keep It Classic book club. If you're interested in joining in, over the next 2 months we're going to be reading The Secret Garden, which I'm really excited about because I've never read that one either. If you want to join in with us the next time we're reading something fun, I'll leave the link to the Twitter and everything down below so you can go check it out. After that, the Fantasy Adventure-a-thon started, which I was participating in, so I read 3 shorter, easier books so that I could cover some challenges and get some points for Team Fairy. The first one was the graphic novel Monstrous, which was gorgeous. Like, the art style in this was so good. As far as the story, I liked the story. It was kind of magical but brutal at the same time, which I really liked. However, I will say the plot was kind of hard to follow. Like, I feel like half the time I was reading this, I didn't even know what was going on. After that, I read another graphic novel, which was Fables, and this one was so good. Like, I'm planning on continuing this series. It is about fairy tale characters who have been exiled from like the fairy tale magic realms into our world. The main character is Bigby, the big bad wolf, who is working as a detective, and like his deputy is Snow White. It's really gritty and adult and I really liked it. Then finally, the last thing that I read in March was Blue Horses by Mary Oliver. This is a book of poems. Most of the themes of these poems is enjoying nature and appreciating the world around you. I think several of them were written after she was diagnosed with cancer, and they really just kind of drive home the point of like, embrace your life and embrace the world while you have the privilege to be in it. And I really, really like that. So those are all of the books that I read in February for Magical March, for the Fantasy Adventure-a-thon, and for the Keep It Classic book club. I would love to hear what your favorite thing that you've read in the past couple months is, and I hope that I get to talk to you soon. Bye!